This meeting is being recorded.
There we go. Over to you.
I'm not sure what we're doing next.
Oh,
Are we going to just...
Sorry.
So it would be great just to hear from you a little bit more, Jen, in terms of yeah, how you found the course beneficial, and then maybe just finish up with a few more sort of detailed information about the course and how people could find out more about it if they were interested in accessing it.
Okay, so
So
Louise and I, sorry.
Would it be that that we would do a course for yourselves? Is that what we're thinking the end result would be?
I think that would be fantastic. I mean, it's something.
Yeah, I think if we were able to put it out to the families that we're presently supporting and ask them and say, look, if there was an interest in signing up to be able to do this, then yeah, it'd be perfect, because I think obviously the parameters of where many of those women will be coming into that conversation are obviously shaped around, you know, a very recently shaped family as well, which I do think adds a dynamic to. I think this as a flat conversation purely about advanced preparation and decisions is one thing, but when you've just had a baby or you find out you've got advanced disease when you're pregnant, I think it you know, I think it throws in another layer totally. So I think, yeah, it would be really, really positive to be able to do that if we can.
So after I'd had my discussion with Louise, once I'd had some further treatment, I actually attended the full 8 sessions of the workshop, starting with the will writing. We already had a will, and you think because you've got one, you tick, done it, but it's not until you speak to somebody who then makes you think a little bit more outside the box. So I thought my will was written really well, but it wasn't until I started to think about my husband remarrying after I'd gone and things like that that made me spot the gaps in my will. And then the funeral planning, I've been to a few funerals, not loads, but a few, and some of them you go to and it could be anybody's funeral. There's music, but why is that song being played? And I very much wanted my funeral to be people to turn up and think, oh, Jen's done this. Like I wanted it to be my stamp. So I spent a lot of time following the session, making my funeral arrangements my way. I've even spoken to a florist, and I've written my own order of service, things like that, which at the time, I didn't do it immediately because I had a 6-7-month-old baby when I got my my diagnosis of end of life, sort of stage 4. So at the time, I couldn't jump straight into that, but it was the sort of thing that I picked up and put down. But then as time went on, the more I picked it up and put it down, it was always there. Like, I've still got to do it. And then I got an infection not long after I'd finished my radiotherapy, and I thought that was the beginning of the end. I started to panic, and I was like, I can't go because I've not finished the things I needed to do. So I made sure that I got everything finalised and the documents done, and it's there ready for Stuart to open once something happens. But it did make me feel a lot more at ease once I'd done it, and then I could move on to the later parts of the course. So one of the sessions that you do in the course is the memory boxes. Now I've been big on memory boxes like all my life. I'm a photos. Stuart's like, why do you print all these photos off? And I was like, because when we look back, that's the story. But then Louise said to me, but do you label anything in your memory boxes? And I was like, well, no. So Sophie's 12, and she'll like to get her memory box out and she'll say, so tell me, Mum, what are these shoes or whatever? And I can tell the story, but Louise said, but you're not there. If she takes those little pairs of shoes to Daddy, will Daddy know? Daddy won't know. That was her first pair of shoes that she got measured at Clark's, and we took that photo and she wouldn't sit still. And so I went off and I labelled a lot of things, and I found that quite therapeutic, sitting with this, because it was all happy memories and writing them down, and I got some nice labels and some nice pens, and now all of Sophie's stuff's all labelled. I'm not as good with Jack's because there was obviously there's a lot going on with Jack, and it's something I am still working on. So like, I know the idea is there, but I haven't executed it in the right way. But it has made me think about what you put in your memory box and making sure that they are there to keep. And at photo books, I've done a lot of photo books, and Sophie said to me, "Why have we got all these photo books?" Because I do them now online with you can type in the text. So I said, so I can say to you, this was December 2002, when I'm not around to say those words, you'll know. And I've shared this experience with a lot of my friends, and they're very much now going off labeling their things and getting their photos in order, because it is our future, isn't it? We're going digital and everything's in our phone, it's in our iPad. And if in years to come they haven't got access to that digital technology, like who now has a CD player? Because I made a CD of some songs that were my favorite songs, and we don't have a CD player in the house. It's pointless. So now I've got a playlist on Spotify, and Sophie knows my login, so she's like, she knows what and when I talk to her about it at the minute at 12, she's like, oh mom, like she's like, but I know when she gets a bit older she'll appreciate it, and then she'll be able to tell Jack, because he's only little, he's only 4, so he's at the minute he's just struggling to understand why Mammy's only got one booby.
You're on mute, Pete.
Sorry, Jen. What I was saying there was, do you think in terms of Jack, and you're saying obviously there's loads for Sophie because she's that bit older, and you've been building it in the same way. Like I've always had like what I've described as sentiment boxes for the kids. They've always had stuff put in there. It wasn't because it happened years before Maya got diagnosed. So it's always that thing of like, why do some people panic into, oh, I've heard I'm going to die in the next few years, therefore I'm going to suddenly start collecting stuff. You think, well, why don't we do this anyway? Why don't we always collect memories over the years? Why wait until we're facing death to do it? But it just on the point about Jack, I mean, I'm similar with mine and Maya's son, because he was so young, at the age when she died, because he was only weeks old. And there's always been that thing of, yes, there's going to be far less for him physically than there is for his older sister, because she was a few years older. But there's almost that, but what will come along with that when the narrative is created for them when they're older is, but the reason why is because this was all going on. And in the midst of that, there's always the element of, there aren't things to explain how much love somebody was given, but it's the explanation of, like you said, there's photos, there's a voice note, there's things to tell them, sort of in our own terms as to what was going on at that time, but how much, they meant to, to them, or, that he meant to Maya, even though she didn't have that, that much time with him, or, so over that time. And almost, do you think, because we don't have as many things, do we get focused on that, I suppose, perhaps too much, rather than saying, actually, it's about the story, it's about the narrative that we create, it's about there's things that we can pinpoint certain memories with, like a particular, like the Clark shoes is an example. I've still got Martha's, this little pink and purple pair of shoes from the shop, but I don't remember the same things about Merlin and his journey, but I'm sure there is a pair of shoes in there. Making me want to look down to double check what I didn't keep for him. But I think sometimes we're perhaps a little bit harsh on ourselves. I'm just thinking, like, you use language there that I've used in the past, and that's why it jumps out. I mean, I was thinking, yeah, but there isn't as much in Merlin's box. And I think over time, I've started to look through Martha's box and try to just cushion it down a little bit to think, what are the key things? What's the thing that says this is her year at 2, this is her year at 3, and then subsequently I've almost measured hers and Merlin's up so that they've got equal amounts, and now we're subsequently doing the same with with their little brother as well. Because I think we get too focused on having things sometimes, and I think the digital idea I think is so timeless now. If nothing else, I think it saves parents a world of terror of having their entire kitchen covered in upteen pictures that they bring home from nursery at the age of 1. Say, well, if you take a picture of every one of them, then at least you've got it, rather than having an entire wallpaper for us with, no, this is you, mummy, this is what you look like, with 2 twigs and a leaf and everything else that they come home with. But yeah, I think it's always an interesting conversation. I think where any of us as parents place sort of our importance of what what things we look at and think, did I make as much effort? And I think it goes back to that classic thing of, why have we got tons of pictures of the first child, but if we're fortunate enough to have a second, there's never quite as many, because we just take some of those moments for granted. And I think when you unframe this from cancer and in and around pregnancy, I think if you stripped it all back, there would probably be perhaps less pictures anyway. As I have less pictures of Merlin than I do of his sister. It's not necessarily all to do with the fact that what happened. Circumstances did dictate some of it unfolding the way it did, but I think we're all a bit guilty of doing that as parents anyway. I think Lise is probably the exception to this. I think if you have both children at the same time, then you've got to take equal pictures of them both because they're twins. But when they're spaced apart, I think there's that novelty of first time parenting versus we're doing it again. This is wonderful. But yeah, we've done that before.
What I did do for Jack though, which Soph hasn't got, is I did a My Breast Cancer Journey booklet for him, because I wanted him to hear it from me, so that it is a photo book, but there's a lot of text in there, so that he gets to understand that year that we had, that it was the best year ever and the worst year ever pushed together. So I do that second child thing. Oh, well, I've done that for one, I must do that for the other. So they both have a photo book of the first year of their lives, but then Jack's got this extra book, which is more, it's got pictures of me with no hair and headscarves and things like that. Like me having my treatment, things that I didn't want to just put in the normal photo album. You can be looking along at summer photographs and all of a sudden there's mummy sat having a chemo. Like, I didn't want to them pictures in there, but I didn't want to lose those pictures, so that he could understand. I want him, when he is old enough, to understand what happened in that year. And so, although he might not have as much physically, because I beat myself up a lot about him. We didn't do baby massage. We didn't go to weaning group. He didn't go to soft play for the first, I don't know, 18 months. And then we just started getting out and about. And then COVID came along. So I was like, he's got no mates. He's got no friends. Like, but when I've spoken to like my health visitor, she said a lot of that baby massage and things is for you as a mum, not for the baby. He's none the wiser. Eat, sleep, change, repeat. As long as he was getting loved, and he probably had more cuddles than Sophie ever did, because I didn't want to put him down. Whereas when you do that, oh, don't cuddle them too much, put them down. Whereas I didn't care. I just cuddled him as much as I could. So it is swings and roundabouts. I was trying to document that so that he had something to go back on. And I just want to be able to like show the people that this is what you can do. It doesn't take that much. It doesn't cost that much. I got a voucher off Groupon, did it that way. So it's sharing that information that I'm trying to get across.
That makes me chuckle when you say that, because you know what, my 4-year-old never once said thank you for that baby massage class I did with him at 6 weeks old. Still hasn't said thanks.
Oh yeah, I bailed out. I tried one with the boys together and then bailed out. So, and you're totally right, Jen. I can relate to so much of what you're saying there. So you're totally spot on.
Absolutely. So Louise, can I just ask, just in terms of, I suppose, a way of summing up the course itself and how it runs currently, so that, you know, any of our other families or even, you know, external visitors to our website sort of can better understand sort of how it's chopped up into different sections and how it might sort of pertain to them and their either different audiences or their own personal circumstances, I suppose. But also, I think, if we're, you know, I suppose if we're going to look at this as openly as possible, for anybody who could happen upon this and thinks, actually, do you know what? There's nothing wrong with me at the moment, fortunately, but actually that would be a really, really eye-opening, helpful, and I think reassuring thing to go through. I mean, yes, it's confronting death and dying. We all need to do that because it can happen at any point, you know, but the actual preparation, I think, is so key, irrespective of the circumstances. That I think it's useful for anyone, and I'd include health professionals that visit our website, you know, within that as well, so that they're better prepared to be able to, you know, signpost and suggest things to their, you know, to people that are in their care.
Yeah. Okay. So as we've said, it's an 8-session course. We run it fortnightly, 2 hours a week, 2 hours a session on Zoom. And we stick with fortnightly because it sort of gives you a break in between. It's not over busting your brain, where if you do it every week, it can be quite intensive. So it's a 16-week period, but 8 sessions. Session 1, why you need a will, the importance of making a will, choosing an executor, understanding probate, and an explanation of the laws on inheritance. Message 2, lesson 2, understanding mental capacity for power of attorney. Who can make your decisions, what you might want them to make, how do you want them to act. Session 3, power of attorney forms, actually completing the documents to the point where they're ready to be sent off and being registered. Session 4, understanding care and making advanced care plans. So that's all your advanced decisions, you do not resuscitate. Session 5, funeral planning. How do you know your funeral plan is safe? What are your wishes? How do you share your wishes? Everything to do with the funeral. Understanding euthanasia is session 6. Euthanasia and assisted suicide, is it the same thing? It's a discussion. It's not legal. We're not asking you to do it, but the conversation is becoming more and more relevant. And it's a little bit of a background in that. How is it done in different countries? What do we need to understand? A little bit on digital legacy. If there was £500 in your PayPal account when you died, would anybody even know it was there? Digital Facebook page or anything digital online banks. Session 7, your heart and soul, understanding organ donation, donating your body to medical science. I don't want a funeral, I'm just going to donate my body. Well, that's fine, but these are the things you need to do. And there's a session there and looking at the way to keep and share memories, memory boxes, life journals, photo books. Session 8 sums up with difficult conversations and keeping yourself well. A little bit of why difficult conversations are so difficult. So we look at the anatomy, the physiology of what happens when you hear bad news. So you go through the fight or flight thing, you go through the adrenaline rush, the cortisol, you've got the sweaty palms, the white face, the wobbly tummy. It's real. It's a real physiological reaction. Don't pretend it's not happening. Be with it. If we think of a child, a small child, a 2-year-old losing a balloon, they'll scream a bit, they'll stamp their feet, they'll jump up and down, they'll want a new one, they'll ask for a new one, they'll do a bit of negotiating and they'll run off and play. They go through all the stages of grief in about 10 minutes flat. So if we can demonstrate the stages of grief at 2 years old, why do we think we shouldn't have them when we're grown up? So we talk about that. We talk about the willingness to be awkward, the willingness to embrace an awkward conversation and just doing it. And then we finish off the last session with a little bit about keeping yourself well. You know what keeps you well, what's kept you well, what are the things that interest you, what you can do to make yourself feel a little bit better when times are really difficult. We can't always change the things that happen to us, but we do have a little bit of control over how we manage those things. And that would sum it up. There's a course booklet at the end of the course, everything in place booklet, which has loads of written spaces for all your plans. Where's your bank details? We don't want to know the account numbers or how much money's in. That's not what we need to know. Where are your bank accounts? If you've got 2 with Barclays, account with an ISA with NatWest, just write it down. It's pointing executors, it's pointing family members, it's sharing your story. And also, if you're not up for a conversation, write it in the booklet and just leave the booklet somewhere that somebody can find it. I thought it covers all scenarios. Jen, would you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think you've covered it all.
I think I'm reflecting on the last hour. I think if your course is as full of openness and honesty and, dare I say, humour as this last hour has been on a subject that is quite, at its heart is quite confrontational and quite dark at times, then it can only be a great insight into the course you're running. And I think I think Louise, whether you feel like this, and Jen yourself, I think I think when you've had a situation like this, and whether whatever Lisa included, whatever your diagnosis, I think you're always entitled to, I think, hold on to a certain level of black humor about your own situation. I think you own it and you can share it, and then other people can, sort of can take from that what they wish. But I think you have to be able to confront some of these kind of things and to be able to deal with them. And I think when you receive a diagnosis, full stop, irrespective of outcome, I think it doesn't matter whether it's positive, whether it ends up negative. I think you do confront these thoughts. Whether you're told a week later that you're curative, you'll have spent that last week fearing the worst. Whether that ends up happening or whether thankfully it ends up not doing. I think you go through this myriad of emotion, I think, that makes you think about some of the things that we're talking about today. And I think it's so important. And I think the more we can start these conversations and I think willingly embrace them rather than doing it forcefully or because you end up shoehorned into a situation where you feel like you have to, I think it can only make for ultimately a better conversation. And I think probably at its heart, a more dignified end of life, path, I think, at the end. So I just want to say thank you. I wasn't kind of expecting to feel as upbeat as I do. I think having sort of spoken about this for an hour, because I think it can go one way or the other. But I think it's really, really positive, your approach to it, and Jen, yours as well. In terms of sort of that process that you're still going through, and are going through regularly. And I think as you've alluded to, there's times where you look at some stuff and you're quite matter of fact about it. Other times where it's up, other times where it's down. I think it's, again, to illustrate why this is so important. It's so I just wanted to thank you for sharing it and sharing that insight. And just a pleasure to actually spend some time with you, because it hasn't been, like I said, it's Tracy who's had the pleasure of speaking to you over the last few years. Lisa, I don't know if you wanted to add anything before I finish the session.
No, I think you've summed up really well, and just a huge thanks from me again.
Super. Well, thank you very much, Louise, Jen, and Lisa for arranging this with Tracy. What we'll do, we'll get the clips up. It'll probably be in the next fortnight or so. So just sorry, something.